Welcome to episode 136 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Shane Weissfeld, who wrote the feature film Freezer, starring Dylan McDermott. He sold this script while living far from Hollywood, and we dig into the specifics of how he made this happen. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 136. I continually build out the SYS script library. I want to thank a few people who sent in scripts recently. Adam Pitzler, who sent in Children of Men and the Hunger Games screenplays. I want to thank Sean Smith, who sent in The Conjuring, and I want to thank Nab Masood, who sent in the screenplay for Whiplash. So all these scripts and lots of other scripts are now available at the SYS script library. If you have a screenplay that you do not see listed in the script library, please do email it to me and I'll post it. The SYS script library is completely free. We have over 1,000 scripts in the library, many hit movies, award winners, television shows, a whole huge array of different types of screenplays. All the scripts are in PDF format, so you can download them and read them on whatever device you typically use to read screenplays. To go to the SYS script library, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/library. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/library. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell a screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So a couple quick words about what I'm working on. I'm recording this podcast. It will be released, I think, on August 8th. I'm recording it on Monday, August 1st. So it takes a week to record, but I literally just finished production. Our last day of shooting was Friday, July 29th. We wrapped up production, did a couple of pickup shots over the weekend, but basically production wrapped on the 29th for my crime action thriller feature script, The Pinch. It was a long 15 days. Everything went very well, though. I think we got some great footage. And I'm actually, as the production went on, I was very nervous at the beginning. Wasn't sure quite what to expect. But as the production went on, I actually became less nervous and more confident. And I feel actually revived. I mean, it was a lot of work, but I feel good now that it's done. And I'm excited to just get into the post-production process. I published a lot of short videos on my blog, sellingyourscreenplay.com. You can look through some of the recent posts there. And I published these videos through YouTube as well. We did a quick teaser trailer, which was really just like the first day or two. Bernie, my cinematographer, just whipped up a quick scene, just used some of the footage to create a teaser trailer. Thank you, Bernie, for that. Again, you can find that on sellingyourscreenplay.com or our YouTube channel. And then we had a bunch of people taking behind the scenes footage, and we whipped up a couple of videos on that as well. One of the other producers, Adam Strange, he edited those together. I think Chris shot the first one, so thank you, Chris, for shooting that. And then Adam edited together, and then Adam also took a bunch of the stills and edited those together into a little video, just again behind the scenes. And I'm going to try and release some more of that stuff. We've got a bunch more behind the scenes pictures, and we've got some more behind the scenes video as well that I will be releasing. So if you want to just kind of see how the production went, it's just some behind the scenes photos. videos, you can do that. Again, sellingyourscreenplay.com. Look at some of the latest blog posts, or just check out the YouTube channel. And I've created like a playlist within the YouTube channel, the youtube.com/sellingyourscreenplay YouTube channel. I've created a folder called The Pinch, so you can go in there, and I'm going to put all of these videos in that, and all the Kickstarter stuff is there as well. I was releasing episodes as I was doing the Kickstarter campaign for The Pinch, and I've put those in there as well. So hopefully at the end of all of this, I'll have a nice whole library of videos, all centered around the production process of The Pinch, and I will put those in there. And I'm going to try and create a specific podcast episode for The Pinch. Just get all my thoughts on that. Hopefully, I'll write it up this week, and then I'll do that next week. I'll publish that maybe next week or the week after. But I want to just do it while it's fresh in mind. Even if just for my own, I'd just be curious to record my own thoughts on the production process. Kind of just go through some of the things I think I did well, some of the things I think I could improve on, and it'll be a good record again just for myself. If I ever decide to make another movie, I'll be able to go back and listen to it, and hopefully that will be valuable for some other people too who are thinking about producing their own film. Overall, it was a great experience. When I started, as I said, I was really quite nervous, didn't know what to expect, but the process went pretty smoothly, and I just, as I said, became more calm and more confident as the process continued. I couldn't have asked for a better cast and crew. I mean, we just had lots of great actors, lots of great crew that came on and did a tremendous job. There were so many awesome people on this project. Everyone did a fantastic job. So I'm really excited to get this thing, really just to keep this thing rolling and get this film finished and see how it turns out. As I said, I'll continue to try and release stuff. We're actually working on a poster now. Again, my producing partner Adam is whipping up a poster, and we will have that probably in the next week or two to release as well. And that's just, the first version of the poster. Things may change as we find a distributor and stuff, but I want to get a poster out. We can attach it to the IMDb page and just start to have some, assets to start to publicize the film. So I would say that's probably the next thing that we're going to be putting out. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. I would say that's probably going to be, the next few months. I'll be continuing to get through post-production with The Pinch. I have started to come up with some new ideas. I'm thinking about a new spec script that I'm going to start. So hopefully in the next week or two, I will get down to start writing a new spec script. And as it evolves over the next 6 months, this project sort of starts to come to an end. I definitely am thinking, gee, what else could I shoot myself? And so I'm going to knock out a spec script, an idea I had that I don't think it would be something that I would shoot myself, probably a little bit bigger budget than what I could actually raise myself. But I do want to start thinking about potential projects that I could write, direct, and produce myself as well. Because as I said, right now, I just feel really good about the experience, and hopefully I'll be able to do it again. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter Shane Weissfeld. Here is the interview. Welcome, Shane, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So to start out, maybe we can go back to kind of the very beginning of your even maybe before your professional screenwriting career. Take us all the way back just to childhood. What kind of got you interested and on the path, those first sort of things that got you on the path to being a screenwriter, even just getting interested in screenwriting?
Number one, I've always loved film. I just always remember the movie-going experience as a young child, as so many people do. However, I was always writing. I don't remember a time when I wasn't writing. I came from the music side of things, and I always came from a very, very creative background. And the music industry and the film industry are so closely linked that I definitely in my last year of high school, I knew I wanted to be in the film industry. And by that point in my last year of high school, I already for a number of years had done a lot of things sort of on the fringes of the music industry, and I was just always writing, whether it was lyrics, whether it was short stories, and I knew in my last year of high school, in some creative capacity, I wanted to be in the film industry.
Okay, so then after high school, what were your first steps towards achieving that goal?
Well, like so many people, I very naively thought that by going to film school, that is one great way to break into the industry. Little did I know that's not always the case. So I did go to film school. I was a screenwriting major. And it was a great experience, actually, because prior to going to film school, although I had grew up watching films and I loved film, I had never really fully experienced the extent of film in terms of the classics, the Hollywood classics, the foreign classics. And I was really exposed to a lot of that as a film major in school, and that really broadened my horizons and opened my eyes. And in my last year as a screenwriting major, we had to write a feature script. That was our project for the semester, and once I wrote my first feature, I was hooked. I had already written a number of short scripts prior to that, but when I wrote my first feature in my last year of film school, that absolutely did it for me in terms of knowing that I wanted to be in this business.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I'd be curious, and this maybe is kind of a sideline, but I'd be curious to kind of get your, like you said, it was a great experience going to film school, and I also got a degree here in Southern California, and I was very kind of let down. The stuff you just mentioned, like, the classics, expose the classics, that stuff's all totally true, but what I felt was missing was some actual practical advice on how to actually go out and have a career. And I'd be curious to kind of hear, what are your thoughts on higher education, going and getting a degree in screenwriting? Is it something people should do or not do, or what are your thoughts?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people bash film school. A lot of industry people bash it and say, you don't need it. A lot of people think people who went to film school are very naive. And, look, you're young. You think that's the way to go. Look, the question is, did film school directly impact me and the goals that I've achieved and things that have happened to me? The answer is no. But what film school did for me was it really exposed me from the beginning to feedback and constructive criticism and rejection, because you're in a film class and part of the projects, your fellow students are to read your scripts and give you feedback on it. Of course, if you can get feedback from your screenwriting professor or screenwriting teacher, that's great. So you're right. It doesn't teach you the practical things in terms of breaking into the business and dealing with the business, but being exposed to real good constructive criticism and feedback is what it did for me. So now that I do think back to that, and I think that it was a really good experience dealing with that.
Yeah. Okay, so now you're done college. You have this first feature film script. What were your next steps after college?
I clearly remember saying to myself right after I graduated, within a year or two, I plan to be in the film industry in some creative capacity. And little did I know, 1 or 2 years would turn into many, many years. And I was fresh out of school. I had written a feature. I think I wrote a Seinfeld spec, actually, and it was really bad timing because they just announced that the series would end. This was the last season, and I wrote this Seinfeld spec. And I sent it out. A few people read it. And right from the beginning, I just started sending out scripts. In fact, before I graduated film school, I started reading up on the business, just taking initiative and seeing what it takes to break in. And one of the very, very first things I read, that if you want any kind of career and make any money as a screenwriter, for example, you need representation. That's one of the very first things I started learning about this business.
So where did you read that? What kind of, were you reading books? Was it online?
Back then, books. I mean, this is like 97, 98, so there wasn't much online at the time. So it was still things actually being published where you actually have to go to the bookstore and buy things. And there were some great magazines as well, like Creative Screenwriting and Script Magazine at the time were still publishing. And from there, I just started reading as much as I could about the business. And literally right away, I got people requesting my material, and I started sending out. But the fact that I started sending out material and got people reading it right away meant the rejection started right away. And there was a lot of it, and that continued on for many years.
So then where did you find these people in these same publications like Creative Screenwriting and Script Mag? Is that where you found names of producers and agents and managers to submit to?
Partly, and it partly came from watching films as well. I'd watch films that I really like, and I'd study who the screenwriter is, who the producer is, because in my last year of high school, that's where I started to slowly learn about the script-to-screen process and just the elements involved in getting a film made. And I remember I'd be watching films, and I'd remember in my mind who the screenwriter was, and I'd do research on them, and I'd research the producers and executive producers and the roles these people play in getting films made. And I would contact pretty much anybody and everybody, anybody that can make anything happen in this industry.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to take a little sidestep here. All of this was being done while not living in Los Angeles, correct? You were outside of the LA scene.
Right. And I knew that there were certain filmmakers. I'm Canadian. I live in Toronto. I've been here my whole life. There were Canadians that made a good living staying in Canada, getting work on both sides of the border, going to LA when they have to, but still their home base is in Canada. So I knew that was possible. And we've seen that it is possible, especially as a screenwriter. You can live anywhere in the world. And the thing about Toronto, if people don't know this, next to LA and New York, Toronto is the third largest film and TV hub in North America. So there were, and there still is, of course, great things going on here.
Mm-hmm. And what I always hear, though, there's a lot of production up in Canada, but not necessarily, where the script originates. Right. Do you find that?
You hit the nail on the head. You're right. I mean, this has become a very big service industry here, where we service producers from LA and New York. But that is slowly changing. There is a lot of stuff being originated here. The government supports the arts. They support filmmakers and screenwriters, and you need to have what's known as Canadian content, of course. Screenwriter has to be Canadian, director has to be Canadian, it has to take place here. And as long as you have that, and there's producers attached and the elements are attached, you can get funding for a film. But you're right. There is a lot of filming that goes on where the script does not originate here, but it is changing quite a lot. The TV industry here, for example, is very, very good right now, very good. The feature industry has always been lacking a bit, but...
Mm-hmm. Okay, so take us through this process now. You've gotten out of college. You've started to submit. You talk about getting some of these rejections. Were you writing more scripts at this point? You had the one feature from college. Did you just start to grind out more and more scripts and send those out?
Exactly. Like I said, when I wrote my first feature, I was hooked. I just started writing feature after feature, and it was great because each script I would write would be better than the last one, which is what you want. The problem was, and this is one of the biggest mistakes I've made, and one of the things I tell young aspiring writers is, I was not going back and rewriting my scripts enough. I was doing second, third, maybe fourth drafts, but I was never doing like full rewrites and overhauls. And this came later in the game, and so for years I would send out scripts knowing they're good, but knowing they can be much better, knowing that they weren't great. And so the rejection just basically started to pile up, and I was keeping every single rejection letter just to keep track of who was reading my stuff and who was rejecting it. And I've got a huge rejection pile because we're talking about 18 and a half years now of rejection. And despite some really big things that have happened to me in the last several years, I still face rejection, and I have kept every single rejection letter.
Yeah. And just to get a sense of the scope, how many submissions do you think you were making in a given year at this point, these first few years outside of college?
Well, I mean, we're talking about good old query letters, I was sending a lot of stuff. You know what? A lot of writers might hate me for saying this, but I actually never had too much trouble getting responses from my queries, getting people to actually request my stuff. I kind of mastered the art of the query letter, the art of the pitch, and the art of the long log line. And this is stuff that I read when I had just graduated about how to approach people and how to be succinct in telling your story and what it's about. So, of course, most of the time you never hear back, but let's put it this way. I had a lot of people read my stuff in just the first couple of years.
Yeah. And so maybe we can just take a moment right now, and you said you mastered the art of the pitch. Maybe you can give us some tips, just general tips for writing a query letter and writing a log line.
Well, query letter, whether you're emailing someone or pitching to them face-to-face, you want to be as simple as possible. That is the best way I can put it. Just be very simple and to the point. Sometimes query letters or even pitches can just be too long, and when you talk too long, probably like I'm talking right now, you there's more chance of messing it up. So when it comes to a query letter, for example, it should really be no longer than half a page, not even, just 2 or 3 paragraphs really. And when it comes to the actual log line of your script, whether it's a feature film or a TV script, 2 or 3 sentences at the most. You should be able to sum it up.
Yeah, and what's in your query letter? Like you have an opening, I wish to send you my script, here's the log line, and then do you give a bit of background about yourself, a bit of background about the story? What are those 2 or 3 paragraphs that you're including in the query letter?
I think in the beginning I gave a bit of background, and I guess it helps, but I don't know if people care too much about that. They really just mainly care about the log line. And what's also really important is if you've written 3 or 4 scripts, you can tell people that, but mainly you want them to get excited about one specific script that you really think is your best writing sample and something that really shows your voice. So that's very important as well. And whether you've written 1 script or 10 scripts, as long as you pitch them something that you feel very, very strongly about that they can respond to.
Yeah. Okay, so you're going along and you're writing a bunch of scripts, you're sending them out, and this is, I guess, the late 90s into the 2000s. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can bring us up then. What was some of the first sort of success, even minor successes that you had?
Minor success? Well, in the beginning, actually not the beginning. After about a couple of years, I did start entering screenwriting competitions, and the first competition I placed in was Script Magazine used to have these competitions called the Open Door Competition, and I came second, and this was just based on a first draft of a script. I didn't even rewrite it, and I came second in this competition, and I think I won some screenwriting software, which is good because I was actually writing my scripts in Word, which is no good, and so I won screenwriting software and started using that, and back then, screenwriting competitions, the marketplace wasn't flooded with competitions like it is now. There were very few competitions going around, and it was and still is a great way to get noticed. And for me, the success really was just people reading my stuff, period, because I read and I knew how hard it was to make your mark and just get read, period, and get people to respond to you. But what happened was, even though people were rejecting my scripts, I was still making connections with these people. And this is very, very important because it wasn't always a closed door. It wasn't always, hey, I read your script, not for me, have a nice life, don't ever contact me again. For the most part, it was, hey, I read your script, I like it, I don't love it, but feel free to send me something in the future. Hey, I read your script, it's not what I'm looking for right now, but let me know what else you might have going on, keep in touch, so. Mm-hmm.
And so then you would just start creating a database of these people and resubmitting. You'd finish a new script and hit all those people up?
Some of them I would resubmit. But again, the rejection just kept coming. And this went on for years and years. It still goes on, of course. But to be honest with you, for the first 12 years, we're talking like 98 to 2010, I didn't have much going on at all. I was writing a lot of scripts, getting a lot of people to read them. But after 12 years, I didn't really progress much in terms of something happening, in terms of like getting representation or becoming a producer-writer. That didn't actually happen until 2010. So we're talking 12 years of writing many scripts and facing tons and tons of rejection. And in those 12 years, I saw a lot of people quit. I knew a lot of people that quit. I knew people that quit after a year or two of trying, and nothing happened.
Yeah. So how many scripts would you say you wrote in those in that 12-year period?
I think I wrote about 12. I basically wrote 1 feature per year pretty much, and then since 2010 I've written several as well. So altogether I think I've written about 16 or 17 features and several TV scripts and many short scripts as well.
Yeah. Okay, so there's this period, 1998 to 2010. Were you submitting to agents mostly? Were you submitting to producers mostly? A mix, or what were you doing there with your submissions?
A mix. Producers, execs, agents, managers. Literary managers. They didn't. The whole literary management industry, I guess you could call it, didn't really start until the late 90s. Literary managers didn't really exist before then, but the late 90s, we really saw a lot of managers come into the fold, and a lot of these people were agents who turned into managers and then started producing. So I had all kinds of people read my stuff. I had some directors read my stuff, and I had some professional writers read my stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that was enough to just keep you going? Like you just felt like you were on the right path, even though you weren't necessarily selling stuff, people were giving you enough positive feedback to kind of keep you motivated to persevere, or was it just pure determination?
I'd say about 95% determination, 5% positive feedback. I never really had anyone say, hey, this is a piece of crap, You're not going to go anywhere. You have no talent. For the most part, a lot of the feedback was pretty positive.
Mm-hmm.
It was mostly determination. I knew that I was programmed to do this, that I'm not meant to quit. I don't even know how to quit. I don't know what it feels like to quit. I did not want to quit. This is what I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so then let's talk about 2010 and that turning point. What was the first kind of success that you actually had?
2010 was a huge turning point because I was definitely wanting to write at the time a contained crime thriller, which is one of my favorite genres or subgenres. I love writing thrillers and crime thrillers. And I wrote something that actually it took place in only one location, and this ended up becoming my first produced credit. But first things first, I did manage to finally land representation in 2010 after 12 years of actively trying. And I don't want to use the word luck because I don't think luck has much to do with it, but the timing was right. At the time, there was a manager who's now my former manager. He had started his own company after being in management and development, and he was still signing clients, and the timing was right, and I finally found representation, and that's when things really started happening for me.
Okay, and so then he was able to, once you signed with representation, he was able to start getting your scripts out there and getting you meetings or just get your scripts read?
Exactly, and I have to credit my former manager a lot because he is partly responsible for me being a produced writer, because at the time he signed me, I remember he was saying, this is really good, but it's not great. However, I'm still signing clients. I'm going to take a chance on you. We're going to work on making it great. So he was very hands-on in terms of the development process and giving notes, and he said, when I feel this is great, then I'm going to take it out to the marketplace. And eventually he did.
Okay, and so what was that development process like? You just wrote a bunch of drafts, he would give you notes, and then just back and forth like that?
Exactly, and not a lot of managers do this. Managers are known for doing this as opposed to agents, but not all managers will sort of hold your hand in terms of feedback and notes. But he was really great, and this is one of the first times I truly learned about true rewriting and what it takes to trim the fat and really add story and character elements to it. Because originally the first draft, it was just a bare-bones thriller, but he allowed me to add the crime element to it, and that's when things really started to come together with the script. And he took it out pretty wide. There was a lot of people, a lot of really big people that read it.
Mm-hmm. And so where did you get the idea or just understand that one location thrillers were something that the marketplace wanted, or was it just what you wanted to write, or was there some real calculated decision to write this one location thriller because you felt that the marketplace wanted that?
It was a bit of both. It was part strategy, part I did really want to write this because it is in my heart, this genre. I was really interested in writing it. At the same time, after all these years of nothing happening, I wanted to write something that I knew was at least low risk in terms of financing. I wasn't trying to second guess the marketplace. I mean, there are, of course, companies always looking for one location thrillers, partly because it is low risk in terms of the budget, in terms of financing, but I knew specifically of some companies that were looking for this type of material. And again, this comes from being on top of the industry, on top of the marketplace, reading about who's looking for what's in development, what actors are looking for types of scripts, for example. It was just, the timing was right. And the thing is, though, a lot of companies that read this said it's too small. They weren't necessarily looking for a one-location thriller. So a lot of times it comes down to mandate, and I learned that very quickly. There's a company that may love a script, but it's just not part of their mandate. It's just not something they're looking to make.
Yeah. And so you're saying like you're doing research, you're finding out what actors are looking for, what type of material. Where were you doing that research? Just Hollywood Reporter, Daily Variety? Where were you doing that research? Again,
it goes back to the beginning, just reading about the industry. And I love reading about the people behind the scenes, the people that put the movies together, the creative people, and reading the trades. Yes, that was a huge part of it. It wasn't so much type of scripts actors are looking for. It was more of the type of scripts that producers and executives are looking for and what they're drawn to, because they're really the first people that are going to read your stuff, especially if an agent or manager sends the script to someone. Usually they're going to send it to a producer first, and eventually all the elements will get on board from there. So, staying on top of the marketplace is really important, but I don't want people to think that I was just trying to second guess the marketplace and chasing the marketplace. It was a strategy. The most important thing was this is something I really, really wanted to write.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay, so we have the trades. What other publications would you recommend screenwriters read in addition to Hollywood Reporter and Daily Variety?
There's so many websites these days. I mean, of course, the tracking boards that have popped up in the last several years, the Blacklist, all the lists, the Blood List, the Young and Hungry List, all that stuff, because you get to know who the players are, the people that represent the screenwriters. And of course, the go-to Variety and Hollywood Reporter are great. There's Deadline, of course, these days is great. TheWrap.com is a really good site as well.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to touch on one thing where you've kind of hinted at it, so I think I know the answer, but just to be absolutely clear. So you got this manager through just cold query letters? Is that, and was it someone that you had been sending scripts to for years? Maybe you can describe that process, because I know that's going to be a big question for people is, gee, how can I find that initial representation?
I hate to say this, but it was a cold query letter. The thing about querying is, I'm not very proud of it. It is the longest and hardest way to get your material out there. If there's other ways you can get people to read your stuff and make connections, by all means do that. But if you have nothing else going on and you have no other way for people to read your stuff and know who you are, you can query. And so, yeah, that came out of a cold query. However, I knew who this manager was. I knew what he was doing. And again, this comes from just staying on top of the industry, because I wanted to be in this industry so bad. I knew that I had to know everything I possibly could about it, and that means just staying on top of who's who and who's doing what. So I knew that this manager had just started his own company, and he was still signing clients. And again, the timing worked out. So it was great to be on top of that in terms of knowing who's doing what and what's going on. Your concentration, of course, should always be the writing, but this is a business, and it's constantly changing, and every day there's stuff going on.
Yeah. So the film, this one location thriller film we've been talking about is called Freezer, starring Dylan McDermott. Let's dig into that specific script a little bit. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or a logline for the film.
It's a crime thriller about a guy who's kidnapped, and he's forced into an industrial freezer, and his life is at stake, and he's forced to come up with millions that some really bad guys think he stole. Mm-hmm. And like I said, originally it just started off as a very bare bones thriller, but through the rewrite process it became a crime thriller, and that's when really people started gravitating toward it. There was a lot of people that read it, a lot of people that liked it, but for the first part, no one really stepped up to the plate and said, yes, we want to make this. Of course, you always hear about all it takes is one yes. It really takes 2 or 3 or 4 yeses, to be honest, but the one yes hopefully can come from a producer that can make things happen. And the guys that produced Freezer, originally they had passed on it, actually. And they came back, I think, like 3 or 4 months later and asked if it was still available, and they were ready to make it.
Okay. So where did this idea come from? Maybe you can talk about sort of the initial seeds of an idea and where you came up with that.
I love these contained thrillers, these one-location thrillers, especially if it's a crime thriller. And it was an idea I had for a while. And I always have working log lines. I always have this sheet of maybe 5 or 6 log lines, things that I'm interested in writing. But in terms of the order of writing them, I don't know. And I looked at my log lines and I said, this one location thriller, at the time was called The Freezer. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start writing this. I really, really want to write this. I really want to sort of show my chops. And it was a challenge as well, because I had never written a contained thriller before, a one location thriller. And I wrote it with a guy I knew, and he was writing his own stuff as well, and it was just sort of partly an experiment to just write this thing and see what would come out of it.
Mm-hmm. So take us through your writing process, and it can be specific to Freezer or just in general what your writing looks like these days. How much do you spend on a script like Freezer? You've got this log line. How much time do you spend, outlining before you actually open Final Draft and start writing the script?
Freezer was interesting, and some people may not like me for this, but there was no outline to Freezer. But I will tell you this, there was no formal outline. When we wrote Freezer, we wrote the first draft in like 3 weeks. We just banged it out in like 3 weeks. We knew exactly what we wanted to write, beginning, middle, end. We knew scene after scene. So you don't necessarily need to have a full form or outline, but you absolutely need to know what you're going to write. And before you write a scene, you need to know what that scene is going to be. And so that's how Freezer started. However, the rewrite process ended up being like 2 to 2.5 years, and that's when the script really, really came together. And I can't mention this enough. The rewriting process is so important because that's when your script is going to really take on a life of its own. And that's when your script can go from mediocre to good to great. And that's exactly what happened with Freezer. So it really, really molded and formed during the rewrite process. Mm-hmm. The rewrite process with my manager and the rewrite process with notes and feedback from the producers when they signed on.
Yeah. And is that typical of how you write? You usually just kind of bash out a first draft, or do you typically spend more time doing an outline?
I don't spend too much time during outline. I certainly have outlined scripts. And it's very important to outline. It does help, absolutely. I think with most scripts, they usually fall flat in the second act. Most people, they're very hyped up and excited about their first and third drafts, the beginning and end. It's that middle chunk. And I think sometimes before maybe you write that second draft, it's very important to outline what's going to take up the chunk of your story, that second draft. And unfortunately, a lot of people read the first drafts, the first 5, 8, 10 pages, and they may even get into the second act a little bit, realizing it falls flat, and they don't read the rest of the script.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so take us through now this process. You wrote the first draft in 3 weeks. You finally got it to the agent. You did some development with him for over 2 years. Then what was the next step? Once your agent said, yeah, now I'm comfortable with this, maybe take us through those steps of what he did, where it went, and then ultimately how it got sold.
Well, the rewrite process with my manager was about 3 months. Altogether, from when I got representation to when the movie shot, that was a 2.5-year period. Okay. So I signed with my manager. The rewrites went on for about 2 or 3 months. He took it out to the marketplace. I think about 50 companies read it. He got it to some great companies really fast, and he would update us every day, who's reading, who's passing. And like I said, the guys that ended up producing it, at the time they were based on the Paramount lot. They didn't have a deal with Paramount. They're an independent company, but they had passed on it, and then they came back and said, yeah, we're ready to make this. And what was great about this company was they're a small independent company, so they didn't have a ton of stuff in development. So they were able to really pull the resources and put a lot of effort and time into getting this thing made. And it actually came together pretty quick. I was actually quite surprised. Normally it doesn't work like this. But if you think about it, I signed with a manager, and 2.5 years later, this movie is before the cameras. That's, for industry standards, that's pretty fast. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then let's talk about those 2.5 years. Did you continue to write stuff and develop stuff with your manager, and did he continue to send that stuff out to his contacts?
It was mostly Freezer we were working on. I think at the time he had several clients as well, so of course he's helping his other clients. But Freezer was the concentration, definitely. Doing the rewrites with my manager and doing the rewrites with the producers. I was developing other stuff, but it was mostly Freezer. And especially when it went into pre-production, I was writing something else at the time, but my concentration was definitely on Freezer. And the producers, that was their concentration as well, in terms of just getting all the elements attached and trying to get this thing made. And they optioned it. The option period was for a year, and I think they ended up extending it. And after about 2 or 3 months after the option extension, that's when it was finally a go. Of course, I'm putting things in a nutshell. There's so much to tell in terms of what went on, but like I said, in terms of industry standards, it actually happened pretty fast when you consider most things will spend several years or years and years in development, and sometimes without even getting made.
Yeah. Now, were there any more notes, like you develop this with your manager, he's confident, he sends it out, then you get it to the production company. Was there a lot of rewriting once you got it to the production company? Did they have additional notes?
They did, and this is usually how it works. They, of course, had their own notes, and they were great notes. And what was great about the company was we were bouncing around ideas, and they were open to our suggestions. And if there's something I didn't like or I was uncomfortable with, I was able to tell them that. But for the most part, I was pretty much on board with their suggestions.
Okay. And so that was that whole, you said you optioned it for a year and then extended the option. That year you spent quite a bit of time doing that development?
That's right, yeah, because the whole point of an option is with producers, they usually it's for a year, the option period, and they use that time to have the rights to the script and develop it and work with the writer or other writers and just bring it to a level where they can go to financiers and actors and directors and try and get it made. And that's what they did for that first year. After the first year, it was almost a go. The elements, almost all the elements were there, and they were still wanting to make this film, of course, so they just basically extended the option, and that's when things were a go, about 2 or 3 months after that.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, sort of, to dig into this development process a little bit. Was there any, notes that you got that you didn't like, and how did you handle those? That's always something I like to just ask writers, because it's inevitable. If you're going to be a writer, you're going to get some notes from people that, they're paying the bill, but you may not necessarily agree with them, and how you handle those notes. And again, you don't have to be specific about this project, but just in general, how do you handle notes when you don't necessarily think that they're that great?
Well, this goes back to the beginning again, where as early as possible, if you can, try and get professional feedback, really good constructive criticism. Personally, I never went to family or friends to read my stuff. Well, I did actually, but I never said to them, okay, be brutally honest with me when you give me feedback, because it's always going to be biased. So it's very important to learn collaboration right from the beginning. And I do specifically remember there were a couple of ideas the producers had that we just weren't on board with. And they were like, look, if you're uncomfortable about something, tell us, because we want to all be on board on the same page. At the same time, the producers gave notes where I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. I wouldn't have thought of that, So collaboration can be a great thing. Unfortunately, a lot of people will take it too personal, and they don't want to rewrite things again and again. They don't want to change things around. But for the most part, their suggestions, their notes, it worked out fine.
Yeah. And I want to touch on one thing. And again, we don't have to talk specifically about Freezer. It can be kind of more general, but I get this question a lot, and it's happened to me a lot as a screenwriter, where, a production company will option the script, and, there's no budget to pay the writer for the rewrites. Maybe you make a few bucks on the option, maybe you don't. But the bottom line, in almost every instance that I can remember with every option I've ever had, the producer will at least have some notes. And I get screenwriters emailing me, say, well, should I do them? Should I not do them? What's your opinion on that? If the producer is asking you for rewrites and doesn't have a budget to pay you?
That's a good question. I think I don't like the idea of optioning something for free, because there are 0 options out there. I think there should always be at least a little something up front. You want to rewrite for free to a point. If it becomes so taxing on you, and you're spending so much time, and you feel like there's no progression, you're just kind of going in circles working for free, then you can maybe step up and say something. But, a lot of times it just kind of comes with the territory. There doesn't necessarily have to be a written contract on how many rewrites you can do and how much you'll get paid for a rewrite. It's kind of all part of it. I don't know. I mean, it's still a bit new to me. I don't have too much experience, but the rewrite process overall went really well. And when it comes to options, you don't actually really get paid until the movie begins principal photography, when the movie starts shooting. So if you can get a little of something up front, that's great. But when it comes to independent film, for the most part, you're kind of expected to do a couple of rewrites, whether it's in your contract or not, and you don't get paid until the movie starts shooting. And we were okay with doing these rewrites. It wasn't like completely taxing us where we had no life. And they really had good notes, good feedback, good suggestions.
Yeah. And so you said get a little something for the option. Can you just define that? What do you consider a little something for the option? I get this question a lot too. A producer wants to option a script, and what do you consider kind of like a low end option?
Well, I don't want to give an amount, but when the producers give you a little something up front, they're basically paying out of pocket. I mean, no producer really buys a script, because then they would be paying out of pocket, and that would just be completely insane. A little something is fine. Of course, there are writers that have option stuff for free, and it ends up working out. But I mean, you should, if they're serious about making your script and they absolutely want to go ahead with it, they should give you a little something up front. With the Hollywood system, of course, with studios, they purchase scripts, they buy scripts. But again, though, with Hollywood, you don't get all the money up front. It's basically an amount against the total purchase price. And then usually the same with independent film. You don't get the rest of that money until principal photography when the movie starts shooting.
Yeah. So now the film, you've sold the script, they've gone into production. I'm just kind of curious, so then what happens after that? And I want to just refer people, I actually outlined my own, my own experience after selling my first script in episode number 2 of the podcast. People can go back and listen to that. But, sort of my expectations of selling that first script were vastly different from the reality of selling it. And I really thought that it was going to be a great stepping stone and my career was really going to take off. And I found that really wasn't the case. I mean, selling my second script was probably harder. I probably was a little luckier with my first one, and it was probably a little easier. So it was actually probably harder selling the second one. And the first one, being a produced screenwriter and having that first credit, really didn't help me sell the second one. Right. And so I'm just curious how your expectation, the reality met expectations, and what was your career like after this thing was filmed and produced and getting out into the world?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. There's always the expectations versus the reality. And this is a business of ironies. There's so many ironic things. And out of those ironies come myths. And I think one of the biggest myths is that once you get representation, whether you have an agent or manager, that means that you can just sort of kick back and concentrate on the writing. Your agent or manager is going to work on everything, and they're going to go to bat for you, and they're going to do everything they can to help you. Hopefully that's the case if you have a good enough representative. But, you have to understand that your agent or manager has other clients too, especially if you're new on the roster. They're going to spend more time with clients that have been with them for a long time. It doesn't just instantaneously happen. And I think another huge myth is that when you have a movie produced and it gets released, that you're sort of like all of a sudden thrust into the business. And for a small percentage of writers, that has happened. And I'm jealous of them. I wish that was me. I wish things just instantaneously happened when I got representation, when I became a produced screenwriter. But for the most part, that's not always the case. There's always 2 sets of dues to pay. You're going to be paying your dues when you're trying to break into the business, and you're going to be paying your dues when you're actually in the business and trying to maintain a living. Doors have opened, but doors have also closed ever since I became a produced writer, and that's just the sort of cyclical nature of this crazy roller coaster business.
So can you talk a little bit about some of the specific things, like you said, some doors have opened? Maybe talk about some of those things that were open to you and what your career has looked like since selling this first script and actually having it get produced, not just having it sold, but actually getting it produced.
Well, this business, as many people as there are in it, it's actually kind of a small global community. Everyone kind of knows everyone. Everyone has worked for everyone, or everyone has worked with everyone. And so I can contact people and say, hey, my name is Shane Weissfeld. I wrote this movie Freezer. And a lot of times people have said, well, yeah, I know who you are, or I know the film, or I know the guys that produced it, or I've worked with the director, or something like that. It's actually a small community. Everyone kind of knows everyone. So it is great being able to say, hey, I had this film produced. It came out. So-and-so produced it. And it's great when people know who you are. And, people are definitely more inclined to read your stuff, I guess, if you have had something produced and you had something happen. But make no mistake, it is still always a struggle. I'm still out there. I'm still facing the uphill battle. I've had some great success. I've had things happen to me that a lot of writers can only dream about, which is great, but I've still got a long way to go. And I'm still not a full, steady working writer in this business yet. I wish I was. A lot of people think that's the case when you have a movie produced, but most of the time that's not the case.
Yeah. So maybe you can talk a little bit about just what are your plans for the future? What are the things that you're doing to continue to advance your career?
Well, talking about timing again, when Freezer came out, my manager at the time, he actually shut down the management part of his company. He's still in the business. He's producing and doing other things, but I was without representation for a while, and of course, that always sucks, but I was used to it. I went back to that. I do have another manager again. I signed with her back in October. She is, again, in Los Angeles. My previous manager was in Los Angeles. So I work with my manager as a team, which is great. And the great thing about my current manager is she knows I spent years and years going out there on my own, generating my own interests, generating my own connections. And so you have to understand that a lot of times the connections you make are going to be just that, connections that you make yourself. But the great part of it is, if someone is interested in reading my stuff, I can say, hey, I'll have my manager send it over. And this could be LA people or Canadian people.
Yeah. So, well, Shane, this has been a fascinating interview. It's a real, look at the screenwriter in the trenches. So I really appreciate your coming on the show. Sure, maybe to wrap things up, you can just tell us how people can kind of follow along with what you're doing. If you're on Twitter, maybe you can mention your Twitter handle. If you're on Facebook, anything you're comfortable sharing that people might be able to get to know you a little bit better.
Sure, I am on Twitter. It's at Shane Weissfeld, Weisfeld. I did have a blog for a while, and I kind of shut that down and transitioned it into Twitter, but I think you can still see my blog. And my blog is really sort of a testament as to what has happened to me over the last several years in terms of the struggle, in terms of determination, in terms of dealing with rejection, in terms of the perseverance. So I think that's still up there. You can read it, but you can certainly follow me on Twitter.
Okay, perfect. Well, Shane, once again, I really appreciate your coming on and talking with me today. Great story, and I wish you luck with your next sale.
Thanks a lot. Great talking to you.
So, perfect. We'll talk to you later.
All right.
I just want to mention two things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one logline per newsletter. I went and I emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, I have well over 300 producers have signed up to receive it. These are producers who are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in this pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. And secondly, I've partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are a lot of great paid screenwriting leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, I've been getting 10 to 12 high-quality paid leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or are looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project that they're working on. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots. It's a huge array of different types of projects that these producers are looking for. So no matter what type of material you write, I'm sure you'll be able to find some matches in these leads. And these leads are exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. To sign up, again, just go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Lou Simon. She's an independent writer, director, producer. We talk through her career, kind of how she got started writing, directing, and producing. And then we also talk about her latest film, All Girls Weekend. She's a really inspirational story. She's someone who just went out there and did it. And I think now she's on her fourth or fifth or sixth film. She's got quite a few films under her belt. And she talks, just really digs into some of the nuts and bolts of how she got this career launched. So anybody looking to write, direct, and produce their own material will not want to miss this interview. So keep an eye out for that episode. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.